welcome to Viewpoint on Ukraine today. My name is Tamara Rosevan. Joining us to discuss the effects of Russian propaganda in Ukraine and the West is Peter Zalmayev. He's the director of Eurasia Democracy Initiative. Welcome to Viewpoint.
Thank you.
Now, I understand you've been traveling around Europe and in the U.S., and you've attended a few conferences, including in Washington and Warsaw. Now, you've been talking about the hybrid war going on in Ukraine. So in your opinion, when discussing these different challenges and aspects of hybrid war, do you think that the West is, the attitude towards this has changed in the West?
I think, if anything, the West has become more perceptive of the exact nature and the risks, the dangers, inherent in the massive propaganda campaign that is being sponsored by Russians. If anything, Western observers, policymakers, analysts are more than ever aware of all the particulars of this campaign. I think the conferences that you mentioned, there was one held on the level of a congressional hearing in Washington in April 2015, followed by a security conference in Warsaw in September, which was on the level of deputy prime ministers, foreign ministers, and foreign ministers to discuss, the so-called concept of weaponization of information, or information used by, in this case, by the Kremlin as part of their hybrid warfare, not only in Ukraine, but also warfare targeting the entire Western establishment, NATO, and democracies of the European Union.
There's been talk that this is the start of a Cold War, potentially, or Cold War era levels of tension, and this is just one of the aspects of it. Do you agree?
I agree with that, and I think we're already very much in a new iteration of the Cold War. The propaganda campaign waged by Russia is said by some to be even more vociferous and much more deceptive than it was ever the case under the Soviet Union.
Now, I understand you mentioned before that the Baltics are one of the key target residents of the Baltics are the key target audiences of Russian propaganda, and Lithuania in particular. Lithuania,
but also Latvia, Estonia. I will start with Estonia. Estonia was the first target of a coordinated informational attack by the Kremlin, if you remember, in 2007, following a decision by the Estonian government to move a World War memorial to the Soviet soldier from the center of the capital to the outskirts. It was followed by a very aggressive campaign and a cyber attack by the Russians targeting the Estonian government, labeling Estonians as fascists, and a cyber attack attacking governmental websites, banks, etc. That was the first harbinger of what was to come. Now all three countries, all three Baltic states, are targets of Russian propaganda efforts. There's a large Russian-speaking community in Latvia, and Lithuania is another example. The president of Lithuania has been one of the leading heads of state, European heads of state, trying to rally support in the European Union for a Russian language TV channel that would be an answer to the likes of Russia Today and Sputnik.
Mm-hmm. And in most cases, whenever Russia is caught or is seen doing some of these actions, and including the hybrid warfare, or is accused, Russia is always saying that they're protecting their national interests and their sovereignty. And this is what a lot of the far-right political parties and politicians say, that this is what they support in Putin's kind of politics, that he's for national interests. Now, and obviously they support this kind of the politics that he's putting out there. Do you see this as a threat?
I think it is a huge threat. I think the other side of it's a multi-pronged campaign when we're talking about the misinformation, the propaganda campaign, and a part and parcel of it is Russia's support of various fringe political movements in the European Union. We're talking about both left and right. It's non-ideological. Just to recall the very vivid example of such support, and that is the €8.5 million loan, interest-free, which the Kremlin lent to the National Front party of Marine Le Pen, which is an ultra-right political party that has been a very real danger to the current European Union project. The likes of Marine Le Pen, the Independence Party in the UK, Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister of Hungary, various other assorted political movements, the far left, Podemos in Spain. These are all fellow travelers in the sense that they all talk about a resurgence of national sentiment at the expense of the unity of the European project.
Mm-hmm. Yes, but it's not just about these loans that Russia is giving out. For example, the Telegraph reported of last month that secret intelligence services, U.S. intelligence services, found reports of parties and charities have been funded by Russian security services with the intent of undermining political cohesion and fostering agitation against NATO missile defense program. So when you were speaking at these conferences in Washington and in Warsaw, did you get a sense of concern coming from Western officials and Polish officials?
Well, let me just, by way of clarification, I have spoken at various conferences. These particular two, I wasn't merely in attendance and as in my capacity as an observer. But I think there is a clear emergent understanding that Vladimir Putin, the Kremlin under Vladimir Putin, is very hard at work to try primarily to erode the sanctions regime in response to its annexation of Crimea and the war in the eastern Ukraine.
So is that his number one goal?
I think that's his number one goal. I think that the sanctions, contrary to what the Russians will tell you, the sanctions have been very effective. The sanctions have contributed tremendously to the current economic crisis that we're witnessing in Russia. I think the main target of the Kremlin is Angela Merkel, who has been the main proponent and the architect of the sanctions regime. Should she go, I think the support for sanctions will follow very quickly. Hence, we have these bogus rape scandals. Following
the Cologne attack, on Russian television, and this report was this discussed in at one of these conferences? This report of a woman reporting that she's been raped after the Cologne mass attack.
Well, this was before. So this was in September, and the one in Washington was in April. But they constantly crop up, and the Kremlin trolls and media misinformation specialists are constantly on the lookout for the weak spots of various European leaders. I think the bottom line is it will be much easier for the Kremlin to deal with these individual actors rather than Europe as a unified front. And that's why I think it's working very hard to erode this unity. It wants to see the likes of Marine Le Pen gain in their parliamentary presence and eventually even win the presidency, which would be essentially a takeover of the political establishment and might lead to a split in the EU. So
a split in the EU as a result of these far-right parties coming to power. But do you actually see this happening? The mass population wouldn't particularly vote for them. They haven't garnered a lot of support in recent elections in France, for example.
Well, support comes and goes, but then look at what's happening in Syria. And Russia's involvement in Syria could be looked at as a way to facilitate an increased flow of refugees that would overwhelm welfare systems of European countries. They have already caused a significant rift between EU's easternmost members, such as Hungary and Serbia, and its Western members such as Germany, where Angela Merkel went on a limb by early on making a very strong statement that we will take as many refugees as possible, and that would, thereby serving a moral example to the rest of Europe. You see, that is a very precarious, position, considering the increasing inflow of refugees, the various scandals that Russians, among others, are working hard to play up. So that is just, that's what we're seeing as part of this, campaign, the propaganda campaign. And all of this we're discussing has a direct relevance for Ukraine, a direct impact on Ukraine's prospects as a sovereign state, which is to say that the likes of France, individual member states, especially with someone like Marine Le Pen, will not be interested in continuing to lend their political and financial support to Ukraine.
Very, very interesting. Thank you so much for taking the time to come into the studio today.
Always happy.
This has been Peter Zalmayev. He's the director of Eurasia Democracy Initiative. You've been watching Viewpoint on Ukraine Today.